Well, welcome to Richie's Roost, Shaco, Mississippi. It is a dreary old drippy day here today, so I will not be able to talk to you from my outside studio like I usually do. But I hope it works out okay. My bride has graciously given me the okay to use her studio for this. So that's where we are, in Helen Perry Ritchie's studio at Shaco. And we're going to do something a little different today anyway. A lot of you all who have subscribed to this channel have been blessed to be born and raised in the southern USA. A lot of the rest of you haven't. A lot of the rest of you don't even live in the USA. But Southerners are sort of different. And those of you who have been born and raised down here will understand as I get through with a little story that I'm going to do today. Now, let me ask you this. How long has it been since you had a story read to you? Probably a long time. But that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to read you a little story out of my book, this book, the first one, Shaco Tales, Southern Fried Sagas. And those of you who have been raised in the South will recognize the characters in this tale and the message that I'm trying to get across. For the rest of you, it will be a lesson. So, without any further ado, I'm going to read a little story from the book that I called Southern Style. And I'll begin by saying that Southerners are a different breed of cat. It's hard to explain to other folks how we operate, especially in the humor department. Now, you don't have to have a real knee-slapping, loud, raucous, hollering laughter situation to create a truly mirthful condition. And a lie ain't all bad if the conditions are right and you don't just tell a lie outright. Like I said, it's hard to explain. I'll just try and give you an example. Now, a few years ago in Natchez, Mississippi, and I'm going to deviate here for a second. I was raised in Natchez, Mississippi, and I do love that place. My bride tells me I can get within 30 miles of Natchez now and start grinning. Was raised, Natchez kind of two areas that they call the top of the hill and down under the hill. And I frequented both places. Matter of fact, down under the hill, down Silver Street, almost on the river, there used to be a place called the Blue Cat Club. And, well, I don't know how I got off on that. We're going to leave that one alone. Net of it is, I do love Natchez. Well, a few years ago in Natchez, a Yankee, down for the world-famous Natchez pilgrimage, was having lunch at a local restaurant and was complaining to his bride about the high cost of frog legs on the menu. Don't know whether any of you have eaten frog legs or not, but that's a very staple cuisine. Anyway, he was fussing about how high the frog legs were on the menu. Now, he was overheard by one of the local sportsmen named Bubba. And Bubba, being the self-appointed ambassador of goodwill for the community that the Chamber of Commerce seemed to approve of, loudly agreed with the man and offered to take him frog gigging to give him a new hunting experience and to get him some inexpensive frog legs. Now, in a few minutes, I will explain to you how you gig bullfrogs, just in case you don't know and haven't done it before. Well, the visitor, against the advice of his bride, I might add, accepted Bubba's invitation, obviously looking for a diversion from the hoop skirts and antique furniture and mansions and lectures on the way it was stuff he'd been subjected to for days. Well, that night, they loaded up Bubba's old aluminum boat in the back of his pickup and headed for a local lake. Now, let me explain to you, before we get into this any further, the finer points of a frog gigging expedition. You need a boat, usually. You paddle from the front of the boat, and you have a headlight strapped on, and you move the headlight back and forth across the water until you locate something shining like a diamond, which will be a bullfrog's eyes. I'm not kidding. That's the way you locate bullfrogs, okay? And you have a long-handled spear with 3 prongs usually, and it has a leather thong around the end of the handle that you put around your wrist. And when you spot a frog, you slowly paddle up to where the frog is sitting, usually on a lily pad or right at the edge of the water, and you jab the frog with the gig. That's what it's called. The spear is called a gig. Then you bring the frog back and you take him off the gig and you put him in a burlap sack that we called a croaker sack. I don't know why we called it croaker sacks, but that's what we called it. And that's the way you gig a frog. And sometimes you may wind up with 15 or 20 or 30 frogs if it's a good night. So they had headed for a local lake. Now they launched the boat, and Bubba was sitting up front, holding the light, paddled the boat, holding the 3-tine gig ready with the leather thong in the handle of the gig wrapped around his wrist. Now, the Yankee is sitting on the back seat of this little 12-foot aluminum boat. Bubba's up in the front paddling. Well, Bubba spotted a bullfrog sitting on a lily pad and pointed him out to the Yankee, who was sitting on the back seat. And then he eased up to the frog and he jabbed hard. Well, the frog jumped away just in time, and the gig stabbed through the lily pad and into the thick back hide of a 10-foot alligator who'd been lurking unseen under the pads with the designs on the frog himself. Well, the gator roared and went to splashing and rocking the boat, as you can imagine. Bubba dropped the light to the bottom of the boat before the Yankee could see what was going on, what was happening, and he started trying to snatch the gig out of the gator's tough hide. Well, it was pitch black dark, so all the Yankee could do was grab both sides of the boat, hang on, hope Bubba knew what he was doing, and listen to that frog roar. Leastwise, he thought it was the frog, because that's all he could see before the light went to the bottom of the boat. Well, Bubba had his own problem since the leather thong was wrapped around his wrist and he couldn't let go. But after a couple of lunges and somersaults, the gator tore the gig loose and the gator skedaddled, leaving a couple of serious dents in the boat and about 3 inches of water in there, along with one pale, shook-up Yankee, who hadn't seen anything in the dark, but had been bounced around and splashed pretty good. Well, Bubba picked up the light and shined it on the gig, which had one tine pointing east and one tine pointing west and one tine pointing straight up. And then he shined the light on the Yankee. Now, Bubba is not what you'd call a real liar. But when he saw the state the Yankee was in, he was opportunist enough to realize that he had a situation possibility that he could share in the future around the truck stop with some of his cronies. He calmly informed the Yankee that he was glad that frog got off. The game wardens are awful tough on size limits this year, said Bubba, and I saw right away that that little old frog was not big enough to legally keep. So we'll ease around to the other side of the lake and see if we can find some really big ones. Well, the Yankee informed Bubba that he had a severe sinus condition that was beginning to become a problem because of the heavy humidity on the lake and a bad back, and that he was allergic to mosquitoes and a few other ailments that he conjured up in a hurry, and that Bubba had best paddle him over to where the truck was parked and let him sit in the truck for a while until all this stuff settled down. Now, he didn't want to ruin the frog gigging expedition, you understand. So Bubba could just go on hunting frogs while he recuperated in the truck. Well, Bubba dutifully paddled him to the bank by the truck, sympathizing with each of the symptoms which had been described to him, and voicing his appreciation that the Yankee was courteous enough to suffer in the truck by himself and not cut the hunt short, let the Yankee out of the boat, eased on out into the dark, and headed for the other side of the lake. Well, when he got to the other side, he'd locate a frog, shine the light just long enough to gig him, cut the light off, and bang the side of the boat with a paddle, splash around, yell a bunch, and in general create enough disturbance so that the Yankee would understand that the battle had been joined. Well, after about an hour of this, Bubba returned with his catch wriggling inside a croaker sack and looking much the worse for wear. The Yankee, who seemed to have regained his health, reached for the sack to help the bedraggled Bubba unload the boat, and Bubba said, "I'd be a little careful with that sack. The last frog I gigged had just grabbed a pretty fair-sized cottonmouth moccasin by the nape of his neck, and I couldn't make the son of a gun turn him loose. So I just sacked the both of them." Well, he's probably lost interest by now and just spit that snake out. And the snake is likely wandering around somewhere in the sack. And with all that wiggling going on in there, it's hard to figure which is him and which is frogs. Well, the Yankee snatched back his hand and let Bubba, worn out as he was, beach and land the boat, stow the gig and paddle, and especially handle that sack. On the way back to town, in the course of their conversation, the Yankee reckoned as how he hadn't figured on the effort that went into harvesting frog legs, and that the price didn't seem so high now after all. Now, you can see that Bubba didn't just come right out and tell a lie, a bald-faced lie, except about the snake, but that was sort of incidental and minor and probably done without a lot of forethought. But the whole operation was just kind of drifted along with, and natural conditions dictated what the action would be. And, well, if you don't understand what I'm saying, because I'm getting kind of balled up in trying to find the right words to tell you, just ask any Southerner what I mean, especially if he hunts or fishes. I really believe that he'll do his best to explain to you. And I can almost guarantee that he won't lie to you outright. So, the Southern Frog Gigging Story. This is our first book. Well, that's going to do it for today. Maybe next time we get together, the weather will be nicer and I can do that from the outside. No telling what'll come up next. I'm going to have to reach across this table and turn this thing off, so just bear with me. This is a low rent operation, so I don't have an apprentice or an associate to do all these things for me. It's been just me and you, and that suits me. So, with all of that, the book is on my website, jimritchie.us. So visit that, and that might be a good Christmas present. That one and the other book, and the CD, and Lord knows what all else is on there by now. So, with that, I'm Jim Ritchie, and I'll see you again next time.